And welcome back. Happy section 5.2 day. You probably are quickly realizing that section 5.2 and section 5.1 are like the same, and that is accurate. 5.1, we dealt more with integers, and this time it's going to be a little bit more challenging as we deal with all rational exponents. So you might see a little bit more fractions and such, but you learned in section 5.1 how to deal with those, so hopefully they're not too bad. So we're basically combining 5.1 and 5.1 into lesson 5.2. So once again, I will leave this here. You can copy these down. Pause the video to do that, and then we will get started. Maybe. Here we go. So we are going to get started here. I'm going to start with example number 1. Sorry, I already started working on it. So if you take a look at example 1 here on the top of page 7, you have 16 to the 4th and x to the negative 3rd. So what we're actually going to do here is we are going to make sure that both of these terms get squared. So the 16 to the 1/4 gets squared, and the x to the negative 3rd gets squared. So both of those terms get squared, and in both of these cases you have power to a power, and remember, for power to power you multiply. So you do 1/4 times 2. 1/4 times 2 is 2/4, but 2/4 as a fraction simplifies into 1/2. And power to a power, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And as we learned in 5.1, the denominator is the root that you take, so you're taking the second or the square root of 16, and that's your numerator. X to the negative 6, you make it positive and throw it into the denominator. And since 16 is a perfect square, we will do that. The square root of 16 is 6, so then this simplifies all the way down into 4 over x to the 6th. All right. So let's take a look at number 2. If you were just given 32 divided by 4, you would hopefully know that 32 divided by 4 is 8. Now let's just take a look at your x's. Remember, you have division, so what you do with these exponents is that you subtract them. So this is whatever negative 2 minus 4 is. Negative 2 minus 4, well, negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. And then for your y's, once again, you're going to subtract the exponents. So you're going to do 3/4 minus 1/4. Well, 3/4 minus 1/4 is 2/4, and once again, 2 over 4 simplifies into 1/2. So you subtract your exponents, this is where you end up. So let's simplify. Remember, if you have a negative exponent, you make it positive and throw it in the denominator. So this negative 6 becomes a positive 6 in the denominator. Y to the 1/2, it's a positive exponent, so you can just leave it as y to 1/2, or you could write the square root of y, doesn't matter. These say exactly the same thing, so whatever you prefer. Let's take a look at number 3. Once again, you have division, so what you do with the exponents is that you subtract them. So you take this negative 3/2, you're subtracting 7/2. Since you have common denominators, that's very nice. You can subtract, you can do negative 3 minus 7. Negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. Keep the denominator of 2. Negative 10 divided by 2, well, negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So actually your exponent becomes a negative 5. But since we can't end with negative exponents, you have to make it positive and move it to the denominator. And then let's try number 4. Once again, if you were just given 30 divided by 5, 30 divided by 5 is 6. Your exponent on your x variable is 5 minus 3. And when I was in school, 5 minus 3 was 2, and I believe it still is. Now we got to figure out what the exponent is for y. So to do that, you do 5 halves minus 1 half. And 5 halves minus 1 half is 4 halves. But 4 halves is probably more commonly referred to as 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And since you don't have any negative exponents, you can leave your answer, 6x squared y squared. So there's some U tries down here. I'll talk you through a couple of them. I'll talk you through number 1 and 2, and then I'll provide you the answers for 3 and 4 to make sure that you can get those. Okay, so in number 1, you have 2 terms, again, that need to get raised to the power of negative 4. So you have this one that needs to get raised to the power of negative 4. And you have this term that needs to get raised to the power of negative 4. And remember, power to power, you multiply. So let's multiply each of these. 1/4 times negative 4 is negative 1. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. A negative times a negative is positive. And we're almost finished here, but we have this negative exponent. So what we actually need to do is we need to make sure that this 2 to the negative 1 becomes 2 to the positive 1 in the denominator. And 2 to the positive 1 is just 2. And then since x to the 8th is normal, x to the 8th would just stay. So this simplifies into x to the 8th all over 2. Number 2, 12 divided by 2 squared. Well, 2 squared is 4, so I can think of this 2 squared as 4. That's what that number is hiding really down there. So 12 divided by 4, 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now let's take a look at what my x's are. I subtract, and if I do 1/4 minus 1/4, well, 1/4 minus 1/4 is 0. Now let's figure out what my exponent is on y. I do 6/4 minus 1/4. Well, 6/4 minus 1/4 is 5/4. And we can simplify this a little bit because anything to the power of 0 is just 1, and 1 times 3 is still just 3. So then you can leave your answer like this, 3y to the 5/4 power. All right, so you can see it's all still the same properties, maybe just a little bit more challenging because you have a lot more fractions versus integers, but the process is still the same. So if you take a look at number 3 here, if you do number 3 correctly, you should get 1 over m squared. And if you do number 4 correctly, you should get 5 over x squared y. So you can try those out and make sure that that is the answer that you are getting. And once again, good work. Thanks for following along, and until next time.